Tips for driving through the desert? Things you should keep in mind before your desert sojourn. Driving in the desert is not as simple as driving on a lovely freeway. Therefore, you must ensure that your four-wheel drive is capable of doing the job and that you have the necessary knowledge, resources, and tools before aiming it at the sand dune. Number 1. Route planning. Before embarking on any desert crossing, there are a number of factors to take into account, so it pays to take your time and thoughtfully plan your trip well before your chosen departure date. Grab a large map and plan your route first, considering where you can stop for supplies and petrol for your car. Calculate how far you'll need to travel and how much fuel you'll need to cover the distance between fuel stops, keeping in mind that your vehicle will use significantly more fuel in slow off-road driving conditions than it will on the highway. Once in the desert, you'll need to be entirely self-sufficient. To make sure you have enough food and water, you'll also need to determine how long you'll stay in the desert. You can look through tour guides, atlases, websites, magazines, and blogs to get an idea of how much fuel you'll need and how long your journey will take, because it's likely that many others have already traveled that way and taken that route. Carry extra fuel and supplies and always prepare for the worst. Number 2. Vehicles and equipment. To tackle a desert crossing, your car must be in excellent condition. If you live on the coast, you will travel several thousand kilometers to get to the center of the continent and back, so make sure it has been serviced before you leave. Instead of going to your car dealer, take your vehicle to a four-wheel drive specialist who can service it. This person will have a better understanding of the conditions you'll encounter and be able to ensure that your vehicle is capable of handling them. You'll also need the proper tools, such as a bull bar, driving lights, enhanced aftermarket suspension, and light truck (LT) tires, in addition to service. A shovel, air compressor, and recovery tools are also required. Desert terrain can be especially difficult on cars, whether you're dealing with hot, dry weather that produces very soft sand or cold, wet circumstances that produce slick, muddy sections of track. You'll need the appropriate spare parts and tools to repair anything that fails. Make sure to bring consumable things such as accessory, fan, belts, coolant hoses, air, oil, and fuel filters. Additional coolant, oil, and a quality tire repair kit are also required. Take into account how you'll transport additional fuel, whether in jerry cans or a special long-range replacement or auxiliary fuel tank, as well as how you'll transport all of the water you'll need. A backup power source, such as an in-vehicle dual battery system or a power box with a deep cycle battery, is also necessary for a portable fridge-freezer to keep food and beverages cold. Then, you'll need to consider how that will be controlled and charged, whether it will only be done so while traveling entirely on the alternator or in conjunction with an outside source like solar panels. You'll also need the right communication tools. A UHF radio is wonderful for vehicle-to-vehicle communications and for scanning the region for other traffic, but to stay in touch with the outside world, you'll need either a SAFone, HF radio, or something like a text-only satellite communicator. Carry a personal locator beacon, PLB, or an EPIRB, emergency position indicating radio beacon, at the absolute least to send out a signal in case of an emergency. For desert driving, you'll need a complete recovery package that includes a shovel, recovery tracks, snatch straps, shackles, rated tow points, a winch, and related tools. If you're traveling alone, you must be quite certain that you can pull your car out of a jam. Finally, keep a first aid bag with you at all times, and stay current on first aid procedures by enrolling in an accredited course. Number 3. Driving methods. The first thing to keep in mind when driving in the desert is that it will cost you a fortune and ruin your vacation if you damage your car and have to be hauled out and sent home on the back of a truck. Instead, drive to survive. Lowering tire pressures to the appropriate levels will give the tire a longer footprint and assist it to float over the surface of the sand rather than dig into it, which will make life simpler on your car when driving in sand. Tire pressure reduction will also lessen track damage. Finding the appropriate gear is crucial when driving in sand, especially if your car has a manual gearbox, because you need to balance momentum and engine revs. If the sand is soft and you're moving slowly, choosing a low range will give you more alternatives for finding the correct gear. On long flat sections when the track is hard, your car might feel the finest cruising along in high range. Start in a low gear and move up until you find a comfortable level where the engine isn't struggling but isn't also revving excessively. As jagged tree roots and branches jutting out of the sand may quickly destroy a tire, especially if pressures are low and the tires are bagging out, making the sidewalls more vulnerable, keep an eye out for obstructions at all times and try to adhere to created paths. You'll need a lot of momentum to drive up a dune, therefore it's crucial that your car has a sand flag to make it visible to oncoming traffic before you cross the summit. Keep an eye out for neighboring vehicles on your UHF, and if you hear radio activity, call out, say hey, and share details like your location and course of travel. Avoid the temptation to drive through a clean clay pan in the desert when you see one just beneath the crusty, hard surface may be gloopy, vehicle trapping muck. Stick to previously made tire tracks when crossing a wet clay pan since the mud will have already been crushed, providing your tires with the best opportunity of getting traction on a relatively hard basis. Drive through the tire tracks if they appear to be so deep that you fear losing ground clearance. If you begin to lose velocity, seesaw the steering wheel back and forth. Avoid driving at night if you can. You want to see and experience as much of the desert as you can while driving through it, and you also want plenty of time to set up camp before the sun sets. Make it a routine to thoroughly inspect your car each morning before you leave camp. Open the hood and check the fluid levels, search for leaks, validate the battery's integrity, inspect auxiliary belts, and evaluate the air filter. While you're down there, check the air pressure in the tires, check the valve stems for damage, and take a look underneath the car to make sure nothing has fallen free. Once you're out of the desert safely, thoroughly inspect your car once more before putting it in high range and heading out onto the highway.